Hello, this is John from caveofprogramming.com and welcome to another tutorial on multi-threading from Cave of Programming. And this tutorial is going to be on Callable and Future. And these are two classes that enable you to get return results from your threads, and they also allow your thread code to throw exceptions. So I'm going to start by creating a thread pool here. So I'll say executor service executor equals executors dot new cache thread pool, and I'll do Control Shift O to add the import there, and actually I'll do Control M to maximize my editor as well. And then I'm just going to submit a task to this executor using a runnable as before. So I'll say submit, and I'll use an anonymous class here. I'll say new runnable, and I'll have a public void run in here, and I'll put some code in here to run. And I also want my program to terminate when my thread finishes running. So I'll say executor.shutdown so that the managerial thread kind of finishes when my thread finishes. And here in run, I'll say sysout starting, so we know when the thread's starting to run, and I'll have another sysout here finished, so we know when the code's finished. And I want this to simulate doing some useful work. I want this to just sleep for a random amount of time. So I'm going to say random equals new random, and I'll say int duration equals random dot next int, and I'll have it sleep for up to 4 seconds there, 4,000 milliseconds, and I'll put the sleep in. So I'll say thread dot sleep duration like this, and I need to handle the interrupted exception, of course, so surround with try catch. And now if I run this is going to work. So starting, and then it sleeps for a bit and then says finished. But the question is, how can I get a return result from this code if I want one? And you could have a class that implements runnable, some separate class, and this code could store a result in an instance variable, and then down here I could access that instance variable. But there's another way of doing it using Callable and Future that is perhaps a bit more elegant. And you might also wonder, how can you have this throw an exception? And we will also see how to handle that. So the first thing I'm going to do is just cut this code with Control X, and instead of new runnable, I'm going to say new callable. And callable is a parameterized class, and the parameter it takes here is the type that you want to return from your running thread code. So I'll implement the missing methods now of this callable interface by clicking on this error thing here. I need to do the import, of course, and I can say add unimplemented methods. And so runnable has a method called run, public void run, and callable has a method called call, and call actually returns a value, and the type of the value that it returns is whatever you specify here. So if I put integer here, I have to put integer here, but it could be any class, of course. So I'll paste my code in here, and just to have something to return here, I'm going to return the duration that I'm sleeping for. And now that will run just as before, as it did when I had a runnable. But I can now down here get the return result from this call method, and I can do that using a future. So when I call submit here, it returns a future object, and the future is also parameterized, and the class that I need to put in here is whatever I put here, and the same thing, of course, that I also have here. So in this case it's going to be an integer, and I'll give that a name. I'll just call it future, and I'll say that equals the return of submit, and Control Shift O to add the import there, and I'll just maximize my editor with Control M again. And so down here now I can get I can use this to get this return result. And to do that, I just say future.get like that. So I can put, let's output that. I'll say sysout result is like that. And then I'll move this bracket, so I'll have a plus there, move the bracket to the end. And this future.get throws two kinds of exceptions. I'll handle those, and it throws an interrupted exception. And we're actually going to look at interrupted exceptions and interrupting threads in the next tutorial. But for now, I'll just leave this print stat trace in there. And it also throws an execution exception. And for the moment, I'm just going to do a sysout on that exception. So if I run this, oh, and you might wonder, well, I've called get here, but I haven't waited for this thread to finish. So I could, of course, say executor, and there might be, there could be, it's worth pointing out that there could be hundreds or thousands of threads that I'm running here with submit, and I could store my futures in like an array list or a hash or something, and down here I could call executor dot await termination to await for all those threads to finish. But if you don't wait for your thread or threads to finish and you call get, get will just block until the thread associated with this future has terminated. So I can run this, and if I run it, what happens is my thread starts, sleeps for a random amount of time, then it terminates, and when it terminates, get stops blocking, and I get the result that I return here. So that's how to get return values from your threads. And now let's have a look at how to throw an exception from call. And so I can do that by saying, well, let's just arbitrarily say here, if duration is greater than 2000, so this will happen about half the time, I'll throw an exception, and it throws exception, the parent of all exceptions. So I could throw any exception here, and although it's not appropriate, just for the hell of it, I'll throw an IO exception like this, and I'll give it a message, sleeping for too long, like that. Now do Control-Shift-O to add the import, and what will happen is if I throw an exception from here, from call, that exception will get thrown from get, but get won't throw this exception. It will throw here an execution exception, and the cause of that execution exception will be my exception here. So let's have a look at that. So sometimes it works if it sleeps for less than 2000, but I've said that if it's going to be more than 2000, throw an exception. So with a bit of luck, here we'll get one. And so now I've thrown an IO exception, and here it's caught a execution exception, and the cause of that was my IO exception. And just to kind of make that a bit more explicit, and by the way, I could do sysout here, e.get message, and execution exception will carry my message that I specified here. So if I run that, and if it sleeps for more than 2000, then I get my message down here. But if I actually want to retrieve my original exception, I could say IO exception x, let's say, equals e.get cause, like this, and of course I need to cast it to the right type, and then I've got my original exception back. And just to show you, I'll do x.get message, so I'll get this message here, and if I run that, then I get my message if it throws this exception. One last thing for this tutorial is sometimes I should mention that Future has some useful methods besides get. It has a method that allows you to cancel your thread, and we haven't looked at, as I say, interrupting threads yet, and we'll look at that next time, but this could be useful for you. And also there's a isDone method that tells you whether your thread has finished yet or not. But now Supposing you want to use some methods of future, but you don't want to get a return result. You can do that by saying here for your future, specify a question mark, wildcard for the parametric type, and for callable, specify void with capital V, because you can't have a primitive lowercase v void type in these angle brackets, of course. And here specify the same thing here, and then down here just return null, and that allows you to use all the methods of future, but you don't have to return a result. So that's it for this tutorial, and in the next tutorial we're going to look at interrupted exception and interrupting threads. So join me again then, and you can find this code on caveofprogramming.com, and until next time, happy coding.